This program is presented by University of California Television. Like what you learn? Visit our website or follow us on Facebook and Twitter to keep up with the latest UCTV programs. Also, make sure to check out and subscribe to our YouTube original channel, UCTV Prime, available only on YouTube.
The same religion that's capable of hideous acts of destruction can also be capable of moments of healing, of restoration, and of hope.
But educate a girl, and you educate her entire family.
There is a sun within every person.
When that anger sets in, write it. Write the letters, but don't send them. You never want to leave concrete proof of insanity.
I'm delighted you could all join us for the second annual State of the Environment Address. It's nice to be able to say second. When you say first annual, like we did last year, it's a little precarious because you don't know if there's actually going to be, multiple annual events. But I'm delighted that we're kicking this off in a way that hopefully will continue for many years. And it's really wonderful to be in a local community and a state that is still very innovative and open and to really forging new environmental solutions. And so the opportunity to really hear about the environment in California and the new things that are there as challenges, but new opportunities that are arising as a result of new solutions is a great opportunity for all of us here. So I'm very delighted to introduce Matt Rodriquez, who is the Secretary for Environmental Protection. Matt has a very diverse environmental background. Prior to this role, he has an environmental law background. He was in the Assistant Attorney General's office. He has lots of connections to UCSB. I think he'll talk a little bit about some of those, with his son being an alum. And he's recently hired one of our graduates, Ashley Conrad-Sitta, graduate of 2008, as his Assistant Secretary for Climate Policy, who will be starting, I think, pretty soon. And so Matt has a daunting challenge as California's Secretary of Environmental Protection Agency because he oversees a really diverse set of entities: the Air Resources Board, the Department of Toxic Substances Control, the Department of Pesticide Regulation, the Office of Environmental Hazard Assessment, and the State Water Resources Control Board. I imagine it's a daunting challenge getting those groups to actually work together in a very effective way, but I know he's done some really great things since he was appointed in July of 2011 as the Secretary. So we're delighted to have Matt here today to give us a perspective on the state of the environment. Welcome.
I want to thank Steve for that very warm welcome. It's always a pleasure to be here in Santa Barbara. I first started coming here regularly when I was working with the Attorney General's office and was advising the California Coastal Commission. I got to know this coastline quite well. And I still have fond memories of attending a hearing at a hotel not too far from here where a permit applicant was talking about how, have I done something with the microphone? Okay. Okay. It's an auspicious beginning. Well, we've got many chords here. Okay. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Well, I'm glad we did this because you're going to want to hear this story. It's an amusing one. So here we were at a very late Coastal Commission meeting, and the permit applicant stood up and was talking about how the offshore oil platforms here in Santa Barbara shouldn't be considered a visual eyesore or blight, because really at night they light up like little Christmas trees, and many people here really appreciate that. I wouldn't advise you on using that sort of strategy if you ever attended a Coastal Commission meeting. It was not terribly well received, though they did get their permit in the end. But it was wonderful working with the Coastal Commission, and I still look back fondly on those days and my times coming down to Santa Barbara. As Steve alluded to, I also had the opportunity to come down here when my son attended UC Santa Barbara. And my recollection of that experience is bringing him down for his first quarter down here, and dropping him off at his dorm and being a little concerned about him, and then coming by the next morning to pick him up. And I said, well, what was it like to stay in the dorm for the first time? And he said, well, it was very difficult. He had trouble getting much sleep because the waves were so loud that it really kept him up. And he didn't get much sympathy from his mother or from me. But frankly, coming down to Santa Barbara always reminds me of what a wonderful state we live in. You know, if you look out outside from here and you see the coastline and you see the ocean, you're reminded of how wonderful it is to live in this state. And it's not just Santa Barbara, it's the sandy beaches of Orange County and San Diego, it's the Lost Coast of Humboldt County and going up to Mendocino. You know, it's just a wonderful place to live, and it's what brings tourists and others to this area. And frankly, I think it's what makes California so remarkable when it's dealing with environmental protection. It's not just the coast, of course. We boast both the highest and the lowest points in the lower 48 states. We have a wonderfully diverse set of environments and ecosystems here. We have some of the world's oldest and largest groves of redwoods and sequoia trees. There's an ad out right now on that shows people skiing in the mountains in the morning and then surfing in the afternoon. And while I wouldn't encourage anybody to do that, because I do have to work with the Highway Patrol as well, it is the wonder of this state that you can do those things. What have I left out? Well, we've got the wonderful deserts. We've got the rolling hills that we see here as a backdrop to this university. And I think that those landscapes and what I've just described are part of what makes this state so special, and it helps to define us as Californians. I don't think it's an accident that this state has been then a leader in environmental protection, because many of us come here and we stay here and we choose to live here because we deeply value the resources and the environment that we see around us. And we realize how precious these resources are. And frankly, I'm interested. I've talked about our son. I'm interested in making sure that we make good decisions so that these resources are available for our children, our grandchildren, and for future generations. Now, having said that, I think it's also sort of short-sighted to say that it's just the sensory wonders of our environment that are important. It's also important to preserve the environment just from a practical standpoint, because it's such a fundamental part of our California economy. In fact, our California economy thrives because of the environment that we have. I mentioned travel and tourism. Travel and tourism brings $102 billion into the state every year. It provides jobs for 890,000 Californians. Importantly, from my standpoint, it provides $6.3 billion a year in tax revenues, and we can use all the tax revenues we can get these days. And some of those tourists who are coming into California are going to wine-growing regions, such as we have here in Santa Barbara. California grows 300,000 tons of grapes every year. I think that's 17 million gallons of wine that gets produced out of California every year. And that's significant because it highlights the importance of agriculture here in California. Indeed, California is blessed with one of only 5 Mediterranean climates in the world. I was here for a symposium earlier in April, and there was a professor visiting here from Duke who started his presentation by saying, you know, I've never been to Santa Barbara before, but now that I've seen it, I can understand why Californians are concerned about climate change. I wouldn't want anything to change either. And it's this combination of climate and natural resources that makes California so rich agriculturally. I mean, California produces half the fresh vegetables and fruits for the rest of the country. And it depends on us to make sure that we continue to have an environment that is supportive to agriculture. So what are we doing to protect this environment that I've described? When I was running through this presentation earlier this morning, my wife said that I should really learn to juggle. And that would give a good, nice, symbolic presentation of what it is we're doing right now, because we're juggling an awful lot. We're trying to deal with significant water issues, with significant air issues, with toxins that have been introduced into our environment, and how do we clean those up, or how do we prevent new toxins from coming in? What I'm going to do here is just give you a very brief overview, and it's necessarily brief because there's so many areas where California has programs to preserve our environment. So let me start out first with air. We've made great strides in California cleaning our air. According to a report just released by the American Lung Association, the air in Southern California right now is the best that it's been for the last 13 years. Now, I'm not going to tell you that everything is perfect, obviously. In cities like LA and Bakersfield and Fresno and Sacramento, we still have some of the worst air in the country. But the annual State of the Air report shows a dramatic decrease in all kinds of lung-damaging pollution, including ozone and particulate pollution. And we're making progress, and it's not a fluke. This is because we've been working hard to combat air pollution, and in particular, greenhouse gas emissions. Last year, I watched Cal EPA Secretary Linda Adams deliver her first annual State of the Environment speech here. And you know, when you call it the first annual, then I felt compelled to come here for the second annual, and you know, we'll see how I do here today. You know, you'll see if you want a third annual, but you know, you made me feel obligated to come here. You know, I watched Linda's speech, and she talked about some of the things that we've been doing to implement AB 32, the state's program for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. In the past year, since Linda last spoke, we've been doing quite a bit to implement really groundbreaking policies that will keep California at the forefront of the clean technology revolution. For example, in January, the Air Resources Board, one of the boards and departments that makes up Cal EPA, adopted the Advanced Clean Cars program. This program has been in development for the last 3 years, and it's got several related components, which I'll touch on briefly here. The first is a greenhouse gas emission standard for cars and light trucks for model years 2017 through 2025. And under the standard, greenhouse gas emissions for new cars will be cut by 34% if you're looking at 2016 levels by the time we get to 2025. And so by 2025, greenhouse gases will be reduced by 52 million tons. The equivalent of taking 10 million cars off the road for a year. Now, I should also note that when I talk about this, that our partners in coming up with these standards were in fact the auto industry. When Linda was here last year, she talked about the difficulty of setting the first standards and the difficulty we had with the car industry. And here's a very good indication that situations can change, circumstances can change, and we worked very collaboratively with the car industry in coming up with these new standards. Another component of the Advanced Clean Cars program is the zero emission vehicles policies, which is referred to as ZEV. I'm going to try and refrain from using acronyms here. When I first got to EPA, it seemed like entire conversations occurred that consisted entirely of acronyms, and it's very hard to follow. So, and I know the governor hates them, so I try to avoid using them. But when you hear ZEV, think zero emission vehicles. And the purpose of the ZEG program is going to, well, there I use the acronym right there. The Zero Emission Vehicle program is going to be, the objective is to try and get 1.4 million zero emission vehicles in California by the year 2025. Again, a daunting challenge, but that's just, again, an interesting example of our work with the industry, because I attended an auto show, and I will be the first to say that I am not by nature an automobile person. But I attended my first auto show, and it was a very interesting show to talk with the auto industry representatives about their new cars that they're coming out, zero emission vehicles, and how excited they are to have those vehicles there. And our discussion was to make sure that we at the state level were going to assist them in promoting these cars and making sure that we had the necessary infrastructure available to work with some of these cars. It's our hope that zero emission or plug-in hybrid vehicles will account for 1 in 7 new cars by the year 2025. So how are we going to do this? I've mentioned the fact that we need the infrastructure for these cars. Another component of ARB's program is the Clean Fuels Outlet. This regulation is designed to support the commercialization of these zero-emission hydrogen fuel cell cars that are planned to be rolled out by manufacturers in the year 2015. Industry representatives from Toyota came by to tell me how important it was that we have the infrastructure here in California. And what ARB is providing for is the construction of new stations that will provide a convenient fueling infrastructure, first within major metropolitan areas. We're going to be concentrating on the Bay Area, Los Angeles first, and then moving throughout the state. The Advanced Clean Cars program will save consumers money at the pump. It will drive innovation and create jobs. It was interesting to me to see the number of electric car companies that are located here in California and are doing much of their research and development here in California. It will clean our air, and it will help us to wean ourselves from an addiction to foreign oil. Also in the past year, the Air Resources Board finalized the low carbon fuel standard. This regulation has been challenged in the courts, and so I'm not going to go into great detail about it here, other than to note that several weeks ago, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals lifted the restriction on us implementing these standards, and so ARB is looking at how it can be implementing these standards. But the goal of the low carbon fuel standard is to reduce the carbon content of fuels. It will slash emissions of carbon then as a result, and will provide a lasting and consistent market incentive for investment in clean fuels in the next generation of fuels, including biofuels, and then electricity, hydrogen, and natural gas. Another area that comes up just from time to time in random conversation is this thing called cap and trade. In October, we unveiled the final regulations of the country's first comprehensive statewide cap and trade system to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and combat global warming. The program places a steadily declining cap on greenhouse gas emissions from about 600 power plants, refineries, and other sources that are responsible for most of our state's greenhouse gas emissions. It also sets up a trading system involving emissions allowances and offsets designed to reward the most efficient companies. Putting a price on carbon will drive the development of clean energy, will create, we think, clean energy jobs, and it will enhance our efforts to clean the air. Starting in November, California will auction allowances to affected businesses. We're working with partners in Canada primarily at this point on cap and trade, including Quebec, Ontario, and British Columbia. But that's a recognition of the fact that climate change is a global problem. We've also been visited by representatives from Australia and China who are interested in initiating their own cap and trade programs. and our recent partnership with Quebec in forming the Western Climate Initiative, Inc. This is a nonprofit company that will assist the state in Quebec in running their cap and trade auctions. It's just a first step in implementing our cap and trade program. It's our belief that if we can demonstrate to everybody else that this really does work, that these cap and trade programs really do work, then the rest of the world will follow. California's cap and trade program offers businesses the most flexibility to meet emissions reductions, and that's why we think that it's a significant incentive to business to work with us, because businesses have the option of deciding which approach will make the most sense for their operation. Do they want to reduce emissions by purchasing allowances, or do they want to just become more efficient themselves? The result is that the cap and trade program should provide the most cost-effective and economically efficient method for reducing the state's greenhouse gas emissions while protecting California's businesses and jobs. Another important consideration, as I tell people, I have no interest in ruining the California economy, and we want to make sure the cap and trade program works while continuing to have a good, strong economy here. One final note on cap and trade. The New York Times wrote an editorial in October, shortly after we announced the final cap and trade regulations, and they said, California provides proof that bold action on a large scale is still possible, even though Washington remains sadly gridlocked. I think we can't be afraid to take these bold initiatives when we're doing this with something as significant as climate change, and we're committed to continuing to do that. Now, I spent some time outlining what Cal EPA has done the last year to combat greenhouse gas emissions and pollution from vehicles. And while we're confident that we're on the right path, we still need to prepare for climate change. So I'm here to tell you that we're still working on adaptation strategies. In December, Governor Brown hosted an Extreme Events Risk Summit. The conference focused on the threats of unpredictable and extreme weather events on the state's economy and business sectors, public health, and natural resources. Attendees discussed the best ways to prepare and protect our state and adapt to these growing risks. We're already seeing the impacts of climate change in California. We're seeing increased fires, floods, severe storms, and heat waves. And it's likely that they're only going to become more frequent. I don't want to overblow this. I don't want to say that we've started really climate change. We may have variations. There may be a cycle, but this is a warning sign to us, and it gives us an opportunity to prepare to deal with climate change. The estimations are that the Sierra snowpack, which provides as much as a third of California's water supply, is going to continue to dwindle. Warmer temperatures will cause what snow we do have to melt faster and earlier, and it will make it more difficult for us to store and use this water source. By 2050, scientists project a loss of at least 25% of the Sierra snowpack. And I know a new report came out the other day which at least verifies this, if not has suggestions that it may be even worse. So unless we start preparations today, the impacts of climate change will have a dramatic effect on our state's economic future and our health. So under the leadership of Cal EPA's Climate Action Team, California state agencies are currently undergoing an effort to develop strategies to reduce the risks of climate change while making the state stronger and more resilient. Nearly every agency that has a role in this an adaptation is involved in our efforts, from flood and fire prevention to emergency management and public health protection. State agencies are using the best available science and are working with local governments and federal partners to develop cost-effective adaptation strategies that minimize risks while maximizing the benefits for public health, public safety, natural ecosystems, our economy, our food and energy security. These strategies, we're hoping, are going to provide great opportunities to continue California's legacy as an environmental leader. Now, the state's efforts to protect our resources and environment don't stop at climate change. We're making great strides in other areas, such as recycling and reducing the risks posed by consumer products. As an example, in the last 20 years, we reduced landfill disposal by about 30% in California. That's despite a 30% increase in population. And right now, California's statewide diversion rate for waste is about 65%. And that's really a significant figure to me when I look back on the reaction that people had initially when you were talking about curbside recycling and curbside composting bins. There was a real question, I think, in many people's minds about whether this sort of thing can work. But if you look at the figures and you see how much is being done today, it really is remarkable what a change there's been in society and how we're looking at waste and how we can recycle our waste. In October, Governor Brown signed a law that sets a 75% recycling goal for California by 2020. This is the most ambitious goal for recycling in the nation. How are we going to get there? Well, while local diversion efforts have focused largely on residential recycling, there is still a large untapped recycling opportunity in the commercial sector. Large office buildings currently divert only 7% of their waste. More than half of the material that's being disposed by businesses consists of readily recyclable paper and cardboard. And other businesses recycle at far lower rates than the rest of the state. Every day there are materials that go into landfills, and they represent a wasted opportunity to conserve natural resources. And also, it's an opportunity that we have, if we deal with waste properly, to reduce greenhouse gases and create local green jobs. So we're developing a new regulatory program. CalRecycle, in fact, just submitted some new regulations. It was either earlier this week or late last week that will, I'll use the word encourage, more recycling in businesses and the commercial sector. Now, another one of our priorities for this year, and Linda touched on this last year, has to do with the efforts of the Department of Toxic Substances Control to implement and adopt safe consumer products regulations. This is otherwise known as the Green Chemistry Initiative. The goal of this initiative is to reduce or eliminate toxic chemicals in our everyday consumer products. Things like removing bisphenol A from our children's toys and phthalates from plastics. That's been one of the real challenges for me to learn to say things like bisphenol A and phthalates, and I'm still working on it, but it's a challenge of the job. But that's a goal of the Green Chemistry Initiative. This will reduce environmental and health impacts at really every stage of our lives, from the manufacturing to the use to the eventual disposal of these consumer products. We're seeking to eliminate chemicals at the beginning of the product's life cycle rather than dealing with costly cleanup measures and mitigation at some time in the future. We've worked diligently with stakeholders in crafting a regulation, I think, that will prioritize the most harmful chemicals and look for safer alternatives. You're going to see, I think, a rollout of these regulations within the next couple of weeks. There will be a short period for comment before we submit them to the Office of Administrative Law. But they are, again, a first-in-the-nation attempt to deal with and identify and prioritize hazardous chemicals that we should be dealing with in our everyday household products. Now, having said that, let me say that, again, this is another instance where we're trying to work very closely with stakeholders and with businesses, because we want to make sure that we don't chase any businesses out of the state. That's not in anybody's interest to do that. And so we've been working very, very collaboratively with industry as well as other interested stakeholders to make sure that this set of regulations is going to be meaningful, practical, and something that we can really defend as a model to other people. Another example of where we're moving ahead, and it's a great example, again, of us working with industry, is in the area of pesticide regulation. We're looking at ways to preserve our $37.5 billion agricultural industry, which is currently heavily dependent on pesticides and fumigants. And we're trying to promote that economy and trying to maintain our strong agricultural economy while also preserving a safe and healthy environment for all Californians. So it seems incumbent upon us to protect the agricultural sector from disease and to protect our economic vitality But the test is, how can we do this without putting in jeopardy, particularly those urban areas that are, cheek to jowl as you drive down the coast with urbanized areas. Last month, the Department of Pesticide Regulation, one of the other boards and departments in Cal EPA, announced the formation of a work group to develop a 5-year action plan to accelerate the development of management tools to control soil-borne pests in strawberries without the use of fumigants and pesticides. I've been told that as the strawberry industry goes, so goes the rest of the agricultural economy, because strawberries are heavily invested in the use of pesticides and fumigants, and if we can make breakthroughs here, those breakthroughs can transfer to other parts of the economy. This working group that we've established, and the working group, I should add, consists of representatives of both agriculture. It has, I believe, representatives from California Rural Legal Assistance. It's got representatives from folks who are looking at using natural fumigants and pesticides, the naturally formed ones. So we've got a wide range of representation on this particular panel. And this group will work in complement with the Department of Pesticide Regulation's research partnership with the California Strawberry Commission. $500,000 has been set aside to look at developing alternatives to fumigants and pesticides. And the UC system is very instrumental in doing a lot of research into this particular area. Of course, agriculture can also contaminate our groundwater through the use of fertilizers and waste runoff. So we're working with agriculture to see what more we can do to try and understand how the runoff works, what role fertilizers play in adding to water pollution, and we're trying to develop innovative strategies to minimize environmental impacts on water. I've just received a report that may help me this morning, or when I got here earlier today. So, I want to say that growers are already doing an amazing job managing their crops with integrated pest management strategies. They've developed sophisticated irrigation techniques and water recycling systems. And we're focusing on working with them and then other members of the UC system and other stakeholders to continue to provide incentives and grants to upgrade technologies and find new ways to deal with these water quality issues. Lastly, let me talk a little bit about while we're working on cleaning up California as a whole and preserving what our state has to offer, it's important that our regulations and our programs don't unfairly burden disadvantaged communities, and that we engage all the stakeholders in the regulatory process to ensure that all the neighborhoods and communities in California are equally protected. We're doing this through the Environmental Justice Enforcement Initiative, and we're trying to develop a methodology to identify in the state those disadvantaged communities that would benefit from state funding or other state programs that can lead to a better environment in those areas. These disadvantaged areas are areas of the state where public health is put in jeopardy by the confluence of a number of factors. It could be bad air, poor water quality, exposure to toxins or pesticides, and just a general lack of a healthy environment. I mean, the lack of recreation and outdoor opportunities. In these areas, we intend to focus funding and other programs that could help improve the environmental and economic status of these communities. And finally, we intend to look at how we can attract new projects into these areas as well, with the idea that we have an obligation to make sure that new development doesn't make the existing problems worse, but instead, if we can find some ways that new development will benefit these areas. Our goal is to protect and preserve our environment while ensuring that all communities are afforded equal opportunities and are not unfairly burdened by environmental impacts. We have a report that will be coming out very shortly that's been worked on by a number of folks in the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessments. That will be the first step in this process, where we're really trying to figure out the best methodology for identifying these disadvantaged areas in California. we're making sure that all our priorities are consistent with a strong economy, one that spurs innovation and creates new green jobs in all areas of California. Green businesses are thriving in California and creating jobs and opportunities for hundreds of thousands of California workers. In fact, California's green job sector is far outperforming traditional job sectors. Since 2005, green job growth in California has grown 10 times faster than any other job sector, which is not to say we're doing too badly. I mean, we've created, I think it was 265,000 new jobs last year. That's more than the state of Texas, for example. Not that we're at all competitive with anybody, but we are creating new jobs in California. And last year, California attracted more clean tech venture capital than any other state. $2.8 billion in clean tech funding, which is more than 6 times what was attracted to the next highest state, which was Massachusetts. So, you know, it's no fluke. I started out talking today about what makes California so special. We live in a state where people are passionate about their natural resources. And by enacting policies to clean our air and water, to cut greenhouse gas emissions, to support sustainable communities, to find safe alternatives to pesticides, I really feel as if we're setting the stage for a future in which economic growth and resource conservation are going to go together hand in hand. Now, of course, questions will always arise about whether we can really be successful in doing this. And my response when people ask about this, I've pointed to the recycling success, which I think is a really good measure of what you can do to make fundamental change. And I'll point to how successful Governor Brown was in promoting energy efficiency in his first term as governor. During his first term, Governor Brown brought about the country's first building and appliance energy efficiency standards. These building and appliance standards have saved California residents $56 billion over the past 3 decades. They've created more than 1.5 million new jobs, and they've avoided the need for over a dozen new power plants. It's because of the governor's energy efficiency policies that we're the most energy efficient state in the country. And while our population has grown, along with everybody's love of electronic devices, they're plugged in everywhere, our per capita energy use has stayed virtually flat. So you can make just fundamental changes. And there's no doubt that our state's environmental issues are daunting, but you know, we have a great team of people. We have great leadership in this state to ensure that California is on the right path towards sustainability and conservation. And so I'm very optimistic that all the policies that I've detailed today are going to assist California. But there's only one more point that I want to make, and that is that it really also relies, our potential for success relies on really the groundbreaking research that's being done in the state's top environmental universities, like UC Santa Barbara, and like the Bren School. The students and faculty here and in our university system generally provide us with the scientific basis we need to address our environmental challenges. In talking to stakeholders and talking to industry, there's always a concern. I like what one of the lobbyists says when he says, well, we're concerned that your decisions will be based on science, but our concern is it will be based on political science, not hard science. We're relying on the university system to provide us with that hard science. You know, we need the support of all of you in this room to continue this work. It's research at institutes like this that brings in the best and the brightest scientists, the best policymakers, teachers, leaders that are helping us to really keep California in the leadership position that it's assumed in the country and in the world. I happen to know, as was mentioned earlier, that the Bren School is putting out some of the top environmental problem solvers in the country, because I just hired one of them, Ashley Conrad-Side. She's going to be my new climate policy secretary. She started 2 weeks ago. I already got a memo from her saying, I know I've only been here for 4.5 days, but I have ideas on a couple of, it's a very long memo, that she has very detailed ideas on biodigesters, biogas, what we can be doing on adaptation. And it's just a real pleasure to be working with somebody with that develop a degree of interest with that energy. So our environmental changes are not going to be resolved overnight. Our job is an ongoing one, and it's going to be passed on from generation to generation, including some of the younger folks who are in this room today. And we're going to rely on and continue to work with you so that we can continue to build on what we started already. At a time when the state's environmental challenges are escalating, the Bren School has emerged as a vital center for teaching and leading edge research. And I'm pleased to be here to say that I look forward to continuing to working with all of you in this room as we take on the challenges confronting the state in the years to come. And I look forward to making additional annual reports on the environment and hopefully discussing about the improvements that we've been able to bring about in this great state that we live in. So that's the end of the spiel. There's a little bit of time for a couple of questions. Steve, if you want to help me out with this. And if I haven't exhausted everybody here by going through this.